1995 was a great year for Indiana Jones fans. Dark Horse Comics were producing their best Indiana Jones work, and the first ever Indiana Jones amusement park ride, Temple of the Forbidden Eye, was opened in Disneyland. But what many fans never knew is that there was almost a collaboration between Disney and Dark Horse to produce a 6-issue series expanding the story of Temple of the Forbidden Eye. Today we're going to explore everything we know about this lost Indiana Jones comic, including never-before-seen artwork and the entire proposed story. Disney Imagineer Chuck Ballou was the lead designer of the attraction and supplemental material. You might recognize him from the Temple of the Forbidden Eye video, and you can take a look at the full video with this link here. Only these 3 pages and a cover were actually made, but let's begin by taking you through the proposed story, and we'll cover the artwork when we get there. So, sit back and enjoy Indiana Jones' Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye, the comic book story. Although the events of the attraction are officially set in 1935, this version of the story begins in 1938. Indy is in Sicily, attempting to infiltrate the Palacio of mobster Don Sotto. Indy has with him a map of the grounds, formerly the summer home of the Roman Emperor Caligula. Several armed men are sitting around talking politics, but Indy is suddenly startled by a snake crawling on his arm, and he falls down an embankment. The guards rush to investigate, but find no one. Indy has disappeared into an ancient Roman drain covered with vines, and he's lucky because this is the exact tunnel he was looking for. He navigates several booby traps set by the Romans before emerging from the bottom of an old Roman bath, ruined but its floor still showing a decorative mosaic. Looking off a balcony, he spots a second, restored bath down below, where a beautiful young woman is bathing and drinking wine. She is Aldonna, the sister of Don Sotto. Despite the lavish lifestyle, she is not a happy camper. Consulting the map, Indy locates a statue and reveals a hidden compartment, but it's empty. Is this what you are looking for, Signore Jones? It's Don Sotto, holding the piece Indy sought, the Snake Scroll. It seems that his workers discovered it while restoring the baths. Through research, he discovered its relation to the lost Temple of the Forbidden Eye in India, where the god Mara could bestow travelers with one of 3 gifts: wealth, youth, or future knowledge, as long as they didn't look the deity in the eye. He's a superstitious man, Sotto, and seeks future knowledge to avoid assassination attempts, but he has as yet been unable to make sense of the map within the scroll. We also learned that he has a pre-established hatred of Jones, as they have encountered each other before, but now he wants Indy to read the map for him. Indy refuses, and the Don orders his men to get rid of him. Springing into action, Indy whips the scroll right out of the Don's hands and escapes over the balcony with it into Aldonna's bath below. The guards fire their guns into the pool, but Sotto orders them to stop to avoid hitting his sister. At the bottom of the bath, Indy pulls a latch, and he and Aldonna are flushed away, careening through the drainage system until they reach an underground aqueduct. Indy begins walking down the aqueduct, but is perturbed to find that Aldonna is following him. It seems that her brother has been keeping her in captivity, and Indy is her one chance to escape. At dawn, Indy and Aldonna reach the wagon that he had hired. Disguised as old women in rags, they initially fool Sotto's men, but Sotto discovers them himself and wildly chases the wagon with his car. Indy and Aldonna ultimately escape on a boat, and Sotto yells that he will find them. The story jumps ahead to 1939, where we meet a poor, emancipated youngster named Jimmy Dugan. Jimmy trespasses on an old Hollywood mansion in search of food or anything to steal. He discovers it to be the home of Nora West, an aged, silent former film star. In her old age, she has become a bitter recluse, watching films in her screening room and scoffing at the young starlets in them. An Eye on the Globe newsreel comes on, and she learns of Indy and Sala's discovery of the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, and about its promise of wealth, youth, or future knowledge. Desiring the gift of youth, she orders her assistant to prepare her yacht for immediate travel to India. Jimmy, who had been eavesdropping the entire time, decides to stow away and seek the gift of wealth. Back in Sicily, Don Sotto is also watching the newsreel. He spots his sister and Jones. Enraged, he curses and fires his gun at the screen before ordering his men to book his passage to India as well. And at last, the story brings us to the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. Thrones of tourists have been wrecking the archaeological efforts in their search for Mara's gifts. The pompous colonial administrator Sir Alfred Wooley believes the solution to be an organized tour of the temple, which can help fund the expedition. Indy and Sala disagree, but Wooley intends to put on the tour with or without them, leaving them with no choice but to help and make the tour as safe as possible. Sala acquires a fleet of run-down military-style vehicles and installs mirrors so that the guests won't look into the eyes of Mara. Sala is very much a believer in the dangers of the curse. Aldonna has been following Indy around since Sicily, much to his chagrin as he doesn't want any more trouble from her brother. Aldonna has become surprisingly accustomed to the work and setting and has come to be treated like family by the other archaeologists. A few days go by and Sala is getting overwhelmed by Sir Alfred's pressure to begin the tours. Indy discovers a series of paintings depicting the dreadful fates of those who look into Mara's eyes, and he makes Aldonna promise not to enter the temple. Nora and Jimmy each acquire tickets to the first tour, which is set for the following day. But that night, Don Sotto and his men arrive and kidnap Aldonna. They steal a transport and enter the temple, and Indy sets off after them. The ever-superstitious Sotto has everyone in the car blindfolded to prevent the curse, and discovers that the car is driving itself thanks to the power of Mara. Soon they reach the Observatory of the Future, and Sotto peers into the Amulet of Future Knowledge, where he sees his own death, crushed and swallowed by a gigantic snake. Believing that no such snake of that size could exist, he declares the entire temple to be a sham. Aldonna also looks into the amulet and sees her future husband, a rugged adventurer with a familiar fedora and jacket. But when he turns around, it isn't Indy, it's someone else. And Aldonna becomes very dejected. Suddenly the spirit of Mara appears before them. Sotto looks into his eyes and curses him, and the spirit turns into a terrifying skeletal shape. Back at the motor pool, Sala begins the first tour with Jimmy, Nora, Alfred, and several other guests. And here at last we've come to the sample pages. They enter the Chamber of Destiny, and Sala reiterates that they must all have their eyes closed and that the vehicle is being controlled by the god Mara. However, Sala is the only person keeping his eyes closed as the entire tour group peers into Mara's gaze. The voice of the enraged god bellows that their destinies now lie beyond the gates of doom. The car levitates and takes a sharp turn right into a wall. We cut to Indy, who has been on the Dawn's Tail all night long, having passed through the Observatory of the Future and found evidence of the god's mischief. Just then, Sala's levitating transport crashes in through the wall and is headed for the Gates of Doom, a pair of large doors which have suddenly begun to open, leading to Mara's ancient spirit. Mustering every ounce of his strength, Indy manages to keep the doors from opening. The transport falls onto the ground, no longer in Mara's control, and Indy points the way for Sala to head. And this is the third and final page that was produced, its artwork matching the cover we saw earlier. Using his whip, Indy manages to board the transport and takes the wheel as it enters a collapsing volcanic cavern. Jimmy, Nora, and Sir Alfred are all thrown from the careening vehicle in the confusion. We follow the transport as it travels through numerous parts of the ride, a mummy chamber, a bug-infested room, and one full of rats. Meanwhile, Nora has stumbled upon the Fountain of Eternal Youth. Averting her eyes from a beautiful spirit of Mara, she drinks the water and transforms into her 19-year-old self, the peak of her beauty. Elsewhere, we find Jimmy and Sir Alfred have fallen through a trapdoor and into the Chamber of Earthly Riches. They began to gather all the gold and jewelry they can carry. We return to Indy and the vehicle as a statue of Mara shoots explosive light throughout the chamber. The vehicle just barely manages to cross the bridge before it collapses, and they enter a room of mammoth snake statues. An armed Don Sotto is waiting here, along with Aldonna, who is tied up. His henchmen are now out of the picture, having been drawn into the Gates of Doom. Before Sotto can fire his weapon, a gigantic snake snatches him up in its horrible jaws. Indy, terrified as ever about the snake, musters the courage to dodge its writhing coils and rescue Aldonna. Driving the vehicle into another chamber, Indy sees hundreds of skulls burning with a supernatural light and realizes that Mara is no benevolent god, but the very essence of evil. The skeletal spirit of Mara appears and chases after them, with Indy and co. making a narrow escape. We return to Jimmy and Sir Alfred staggering along with their treasures when Mara suddenly appears. Jimmy drops what he's carrying and makes a break for it, but Sir Alfred is too greedy to let go, falling and turning to see Mara as he suddenly suffers a horrific demise. The voice of Mara calls out to Jimmy that if he ever returns, he will be doomed. Indy and the transport arrive and pick up Jimmy. Continuing through booby traps and collapsing corridors, the vehicle breaks through the ground and crashes back at the motor pool. Indy is about to roll up his sleeves and head back in search of Nora when she suddenly emerges from the Chamber of Destiny. She is ravishingly beautiful. Indy looks at her with interest, and Aldonna stomps off in a huff. The epilogue is told mostly through a second Eye on the Globe segment. Jimmy discovered a large single jewel in his pocket, but gave it away to a group of starving villagers. The notoriety of this action led to him being hired by a Hollywood studio where he became a big star. Indy and Sala close off the temple, explaining that it was decimated by an earthquake. Aldonna inherits her brother's fortune and uses it to launch a fashion line inspired by Mara. We see Indy depart for his next adventure, and we see the beautiful Nora West emerging from the temple, but the newsreel narrator comments that it must have been a publicity stunt. And Indy's final word is that Mara is a trickster, that no one escaped the temple with anything good. Except for Nora West, of course. And with that, we get one final scene with Nora West back in her Hollywood mansion. She is obsessing over a tiny wrinkle in her cheek and reveals a flask which she had filled from the fountain. The water glows and she tries to resist, but succumbs to the desire. With just one tiny, tiny sip, she is reduced to an infant, perhaps permanently. Her manservant enters the room and drops the tray with her lunch and a newspaper, which reads, "Indiana Jones denies rumor that he rediscovered the Ark of the Covenant." And that concludes Indiana Jones' Adventure Temple of the Forbidden Eye, the comic book story. It would have been a very welcome addition to the library of Indiana Jones comics and a wonderful companion to the ride, which would give readers so much extra context on the backstory and details of the iconic Disneyland attraction. Sadly, Dark Horse and Lucasfilm did not move forward with the project as they were shifting focus to Star Wars, but I hope you found some solace in this video. Be sure to give me your thoughts down below and make sure you're subscribed because we have a lot of exciting things still to come this year. So, until next time, my friends, thank you for watching, and I wish you all fortune and glory. Bye-bye now.